Hi folks, thanks for hanging in there as long as you have. This is part 3 of a turgid review of Rangers' turgid 2022-2023 season. Part 2, we ended asking how was Gio going to get on after that horrible Champions League, that record-breakingly bad Champions League group stage campaign came crashing to an end on the 1st of November with that home defeat by Ajax. We all know the answer. He wasn't going to get on at all. We're already looking for a kind of miraculous response domestically to justify the lows that we'd hit, mainly around the Champions League campaign, but also that 4-0 defeat at Parkhead. Didn't happen. We go to Perth. This was probably the moment that it was all over. We got to Perth. We've got the ball for the first 40 minutes of the game. We have put about 50 crosses, was it, into the St Johnstone box in the first half and don't even look like scoring. It's a repetition of what happened to us against Livingston just a few weeks previously at Ibrox. So we drew one each, we equalised in the last minute, and by the way, when we equalised that day, I'm sat up in the main stand and I can see Gio down in the track turning round to the east enclosure giving it, yes, here we go, we've saved this game, and you're thinking, no Gio, do you even understand what this club's about, mate? We didn't save this game, we've still chucked it. That day we'd put 75 crosses into the Livingston box. The horseshoe wasn't working. And up at St Johnstone that day, we have John Lundstrom just deciding that he'd had enough. He chucks it when a pass of his goes astray on the Bobbly McDermott Park pitch. He starts blaming whoever it was he was supposed to be passing the ball to. Just lets the ball roll free. And James Brown, I feel good. No, I certainly did not. I'm never going to forget that guy's name. The St Johnstone fullback who hadn't scored a goal in his entire career, picks up the ball about 50 yards for goal and zips it right into the top corner. We go 2 goals down. We pull one back, of course, but it's too late. We've lost up at McDermott. That was it. The calls for Gio to go upped in volume. We had a miserable 1-0 win over Hearts, like a midweeker, and then we play St Mirren at Paisley in the last game before the break for the World Cup. We draw one each. It's just not good enough. We're all over the place. And maybe by this point, the mitigation, we had lost Tom Lawrence, who'd started the season really well. He scored a free kick against PSV Eindhoven, that crucial match in the playoff stages of the Champions League. He gets injured, a couple of weeks later, and we've lost him. I've got to the stage where I forget how many players we've actually got on our books. Steve Davis, he scores the winner, the only goal of the game against Dundee in a terrible League Cup match. This is a Dundee team who struggled to get out the Championship. They did win the SPFL Championship, as you know, but their manager parted ways with him as soon as they won it because they were pretty bad by their own standards. Steve Davis scores a goal straight away. We go 1 goal up against them, and by the end we are hanging on. The Gio must go bus. I wasn't on it by that point, but I was checking out the timetable and the bus stop and where to get on if I needed to. And by the time we drew that game at Paisley, that was it. It was time for Gio to go, and go he did in really poor fashion, really confusing fashion. He'd done this interview for Sky, I think marking the anniversary of his first year in charge of Rangers. But of course, Sky had actually interviewed him a few weeks previously before this bad run of league results. So that went out after the season had stopped temporarily for the World Cup. Sounded like Gio was, he's ready to go, that the club had let this video, this interview be aired, and it sounded like that was it. Gio was going to be here for the duration, and next thing we know, he's been sacked pretty much on the anniversary of his arrival. Gio came in as manager season before last. He officially took over the day after we lost the League Cup semi-final to Hibs when Steven Gerrard had just left it a few days earlier. We didn't actually have a manager at that point. And I get my ticket in. I get my ticket in through the post for the League Cup semi-final against Aberdeen this season. The day Gio was actually sacked, so that was quite symbolic. In comes the man who'd been the kind of banquo at the feast, the ghost at the feast, when we beat Aberdeen 4-1 in October. Michael Beale had been sitting up in the main stand, doing quite well with Queen's Park Rangers at that point, and I don't think Gio really liked that. That was one of the things that came out when he actually left the club. He didn't appreciate Michael Beale being in the ground that day, and it looked like Michael Beale was just, the minute he got any kind of good reports from his very brief time at Queen's Park Rangers, it was wanting to cash that in and get himself back to Ibrox. The man was determined to get the Rangers job, the Glasgow Rangers job, and he did. He gets the gig, and immediately there's a turnaround. He arrives during that World Cup break. It's a bit of time to work with the players. He has a mid-season friendly. At the time the World Cup was at the quarter-final stage, that Saturday afternoon. We beat Bayer Leverkusen 3-0 in a mid-season friendly. Didn't really tell us anything about his selections, but Michael Beale was also having to deal with all these injuries. Like I said, Stephen Davis, we eventually lose him as well. Um, you know, we've got Ridvan Yilmaz coming in that game against Aberdeen. I keep talking about in October. We start to play really well in place of Borna, because who's going to the World Cup. Ping, he just gets hit with the sniper's rifle. Nobody anywhere near him, and he's out for ages as well. Yanis Hadji was taking his time coming back. One of the first things Michael Beale does is get in Nico Raskin and Todd Cantwell. Raskin, a really solid signing. Todd Cantwell, a sensational signing. He gets them in January. That's his kind of player. Just as Ange Postecoglou seems to be doing his Moneyball thing with Japan, a market that he knows really well. Michael Beale is using the English Championship as a country that he can deal with. We seem to be getting in that kind of player. We played against Raskin very briefly when we played Standard Liège during the COVID lockdown season, so he knew about him as well. He knows a player. It looks like he really knows the kind of players that he wants and how to get the best out of them, Michael Beale. And we went on a great run. The other thing was we had 5 games. We turned about 3 games left in the league against Celtic, and the other 2 cups, the other 2 competitions were available to win. And Beale basically beat everybody except Celtic. The only time we dropped points to anybody other than Celtic was, it was April before we actually dropped points. We lost up at Pittodrie, and that was when we're looking forward to the Scottish Cup semi-final against Celtic. And then this last week when we drew 2 weeks with Hearts, when we had the kind of sentimental farewell, kind of testimonial type night, where we said goodbye to Alan McGregor, Ryan Kent, and all these kind of players. So yeah, he's capable of beating everybody except Celtic. I don't really blame him for that, because obviously Celtic are they're setting the standard these days. That's the final domino that's got to fall. And he seemed to, his worst performance as manager against Celtic was a League Cup final. Give it a major chance for silverware there. But the criticism was it hadn't gone with Cantwell and hadn't gone with Raskin. But at that point in time, our best performance had been a 3-0 destruction of Hearts at Tynecastle, with John Lundstrom and Glenn Kamara playing really well in midfield. So the manager was quite right to go with them again, as opposed to a couple of players who'd never experienced an Old Firm game. So it's kind of 20/20 vision hindsight. But it was a bad performance that day. But we only lose 2-1. And that's the thing that's happening under Beale. It's the same thing that happened under Gerrard. We very rarely, if we were going to lose a game, it wasn't going to be by much. There's a certain level of performance that he'd instilled in the players and demanded from them. The hangover from last season, you could definitely see they're still exhausted after playing over 60 games in last season's extensive campaign, taking us to a European final. And as I said in the previous video, that Champions League campaign, the condensed nature of it, hit us really badly. The injuries mounted up. Michael Beale at times was struggling to get a tune out of them, but he got a draw against Celtic in the league game at Ibrox, the New Year's game, the festive period match. Went a goal down early on. There's a lot of catastrophic mistakes that marked his first few Old Firm derbies. Michael Beale, catastrophic individual mistakes. You could start to see, this wasn't the 4-0 hammering we're taking under Gio of Celtic. This was, you can see the individual moments where it's all going wrong. He's coming in, and if he gets that solved, we're going to beat them. And we didn't. They put us at the Scottish Cup, 1-0 with catastrophic mistakes. Went to Parkhead with Alfredo Morelos. It was a catastrophic mistake from the referee not to allow him to score the opening goal. It was chopped off for no good reason. We went down 3-2 that day, but we're going toe-to-toe with them, and things started looking generally better. Now, the whole point is, we didn't beat Celtic until the league was actually over. A lot of accusations about it being a B team, and indeed we did have Robbie McCrory in goals and John Souttar, who had only had a few starts all season, with Ravi Matondo up front. So it was our B team. We did go out there and we gave Celtic a good day. 3-0 thumping, and Michael Beale looks like he knows what he's doing. It'll be next season before we find out exactly what he's capable of, but it looks like the club is in safe hands with his management. He's got a great style of football, a very fluid style of football. The Gio horseshoe is totally consigned to the dustbin, and you'll be glad to know, just as I'm glad to know, that season, which had to be done, we got into the Champions League group stage, we've got that under the belt again. We got that 3-0 win over Celtic to show that we can, beat our nearest and most despised rivals. So it's looking good, folks, but it's only looking good as we look at the future. 2022, 2023, let's never talk of it again.